It is now August, and we are less than 3 weeks away from the release of one of the year's most highly anticipated games in Black Myth: Wukong. And this game continues to get bigger and better in every single way. It's a big game, and a big game calls for a big video to catch you all up for everything we know about the upcoming Journey to the West inspired action role-playing game, Black Myth: Wukong. From the game's combat, hidden boss mechanics, loot system, level design, side quests, story, game length, microtransactions, to its achievements and beyond, we are covering absolutely everything we know about Black Myth: Wukong. It is massive, and speaking of a massive proposition, if you're even slightly interested in giving this game a shot, go ahead and participate in my giveaway of the game if you are interested in playing the Digital Deluxe Edition for the platform of your choice. The giveaway is open to everyone, so why not test your luck? And remember to check your emails on the 19th of August, as that is when the giveaway will end. The winner will be emailed directly following the end of the giveaway. All details are linked in the description. Due to the sheer size of this video, let's break it up for you in 3 key parts that we are going to be covering today, with part 1 outlining everything pertaining to the game's combat, with part 2 diving deep into Black Myth's level design, before concluding the game's story and setting in part 3. Be sure to drop a fat like on this video, as it took a while to produce, but enough of that, right? Let's first discuss the game's combat and progression, as this is the meat and bones of Black Myth: Wukong here. In this section, we are diving deep, examining the game's 3 fighting styles, experience system, boss mechanics, and more. So if you're itching for a thorough examination of what to expect in Black Myth's gameplay, you're not gonna want to skip this section. Let's get into it. Gameplay revolves around the use of Wukong's primary weapon, the staff. This staff is your main way of dishing out damage, and can be customized and upgraded throughout the game, and even contains 3 stances that alters the attacks of this weapon, of which we will touch up on later. Like Stellar Blade and God of War, Wukong has both a light and heavy attack, with gameplay here being more about aggression, with unleashing a flurry of quick attacks and perfect dodges over blocking and attacking. In fact, there is no block button to speak of, with the left bumper or L1 serving as a way to reflect incoming projectiles as Wukong rapidly rotates his staff to prevent incoming projectile damage. While not entirely similar to it, this game is most similar to Bloodborne when compared to the Souls-like genre, in the sense that Bloodborne is all about laying on the offense, with dodging being your only true means of staying untouched. With those who played Black Myth: Wukong, they quickly remarked that the heavy attack was almost useless with the default stance, unless the player had accrued enough focus where the heavy attack actually becomes devastating. So in Black Myth: Wukong, focus is a resource gained during a battle that is accrued after Wukong strings together hits on enemies and after pulling off perfect dodges, in which a player dodges right before getting hit. In regards to the dodging here, players can't just spam the dodge button every which way to get out of harm's way, as after a 3rd consecutive dodge, the player will be penalized with a lengthy recovery window, opening up the player to damage. Dodging when necessary without relying on spamming it is key to getting through the game's encounters here. Getting back to focus, after the player's focus bar becomes full, players can unleash their strong attacks with the heavy attack button to inflict massive damage on enemies when the attack lands, and it is this element to the game, building up focus through standard attacks and timed dodges, and to unleash devastating strong attacks, that really sets the game apart from other action RPGs. Just like games like Sekiro is a dance of attacking along with perfect parries, so too is Black Myth: Wukong, except that instead of parries, you've got perfect dodges, trying to build up focus to cash in on powerful moves to increase your odds of survival. Talking about increasing your odds of survival, upon slaying enemy and boss Yao Guai, the player is awarded Will, this game's equivalent to EXP. And upon acquiring Will, the Will bar will fill up. Once the Will bar completely fills, this will net the player a resource called Spark, which is essentially a skill point. So this game's progression essentially revolves around these sparks, or skill points, and using them in the game's 3 extensive skill trees. The skill trees revolve around passive buffs, magic and transformations, and finally staff and stances. These skills can be respec'd at any point, so no need to worry about having to stick with skill tree decisions that you ultimately were unhappy with. We mentioned magic and transformations being part of the skill trees, so let's dive into that, as this is an integral mechanic to Black Myth Wukong. The player is able to slot up to 4 magic spells at any given time, with many more magic spells being able to be swapped out should you so choose. The spell Immobilize is a spell that comes in clutch, as players are able to freeze enemies in place for a few seconds, allowing players to dish out some damage without the fear of being attacked in the process. While standard enemies will be frozen in place for up to a few seconds, bosses will be immobilized for just a fraction of that time, but like pretty much every aspect of this game, can be upgraded to get more potency out of the spell. In addition to Immobilize, previewers remarked about the awesome ability for Wukong to morph into a select few of the mini-boss and boss creatures to unleash havoc across the battlefield as these boss characters. While morphed into these bosses, Wukong assumes the life bar of these creatures, and should these characters' life bars become completely depleted, Wukong morphs back to himself with his life bar at the same value prior to the boss transformation. So there is definitely a lot of strategy that comes with the deployment of these magical properties. Finally, the game employs 3 stances. These stances are the Smash stance, which is the jack-of-all-trades stance, where Wukong contains both his standard light attacks with his heavy attacks being a standard heavy hit that can be worked into a combo or used on its own with enough focus. This Smash stance is the default stance and first stance introduced to players. The second stance, the Pillar stance, unlocked at level 5, is a stance where, upon holding down the heavy attack button, has Wukong perch atop his staff, with the staff growing larger and larger, hoisting Wukong higher up into the air the longer the heavy attack button is held down. This makes it so that enemies beneath Wukong are unable to hit him, getting you out of harm's way, while at the same time generating that valuable focus energy that you can spend to absolutely destroy enemies with massive thwomps of the staff. The final stance, which can be unlocked at level 20, is called the Thrust stance, a stance that excels at delivering medium to long range jabs at enemies. While these stances are cool and all, what makes this all the better is that players can swap between these stances on the fly in the middle of combat, allowing players that extra verticality if they so desire with the Pillar stance, and then going all out with the Smash stance for some added aggression. Before moving on, we gotta address the gear system here in Black Myth Wukong, as the gear system here is apparently quite robust. Players will come across lots of loot here throughout the game, both in the form of items and gear, with such gear being color-coded by rarity like many RPG games. Some armor sets net bonuses to the player should the player equip the full set as well, so definitely be on the look for these bonuses when making your desired build, if you're so into that. Accessories also play a big role, like one accessory being a circlet that allows the player to use a healing gourd, this game's version of an Estus flask for example, while sprinting, giving greater utility to the utilization of the game's mechanics. Black Myth Wukong is slated to contain a ton of boss fights, in fact over 80 if the insider information turns out to be true. Boss fights are a massive component of the title, yet there's more to them in Black Myth than just being able to transform into a select number of them, as certain boss fights in the game are said to have optional second phases to them. Revealed from German Strands on X, certain boss fights will transition into an optional second phase if the player manages to defeat the boss within a certain time frame. Speedy players who rampage through such fights could have the tides turned on them in these fights, as these optional second phase encounters ramp up the difficulty considerably, providing a challenge for those skilled enough to unlock them in the first place, in what could be described as game science's take on a dynamic difficulty. In an article from VG247, the author Dom Pepiot had this to say about how certain boss encounters subverted his expectations during his demo playthrough at Summer Game Fest. Design choices like unassuming bosses that fall with a fair amount of ease, but then spring back to life in a new form and with a whole new health bar. They sucker punch you into a false sense of security, then take advantage of your dented life bar and kill you as you try to suck the last remaining charge from your definitely not an Estus flask. It remains unclear what these time thresholds are for these select boss fights to engage in the optional second phases, and if additional rewards like more EXP or loot will be rewarded to the player should they conquer these optional second phase encounters. But this is certainly a unique component of Black Myth Wukong that we haven't really seen in the action role-playing genre. With the game launching with New Game Plus, this unique boss aspect will undoubtedly provide players with additional content and challenges in subsequent runs, further extending the replayability of this game. If you are curious about how long the game may take to finish, Game Science stated back in 2020 that it would take around 15 hours to get through an average playthrough. Whether this number has changed over the years remains to be seen, as this studio has grown considerably since this statement was made. But regardless, with over 80 boss fights, many of which containing optional second phases and with plenty of side quests, there definitely seems to be no shortage of content in Black Myth: Wukong. In addition, German Strands on X reports that the game will also feature no microtransactions, and that is something we can all celebrate. Alright, so a lot of people have been talking about this game like it's a Souls-like game, but like we discussed going over the combat, this game is actually quite different in many ways. Unlike FromSoft's Soulsborne games and many other games within the genre, Black Myth: Wukong players will be able to pause the game at any point, including mid-fight. On top of that, players lose only a fraction of their EXP on death, so you're still able to hold on to most of your valuable unused XP should you meet your untimely death. In addition, players can upgrade their stats at any point, even while in combat, with players able to freely reallocate skill points and respec their character. This definitely adds a layer of accessibility and impromptu customization that Souls-like games certainly don't have while in the thick of battle. In addition, the Souls-like games are known for their large, interconnected, and sprawling worlds. Black Myth: Wukong, on the other hand, is confirmed to be mission-based, featuring linear levels with lots of invisible walls, with some branching pathways that can lead to secret areas that lay host to secret gear, bosses, and the like. While the developers at Game Science admittedly said that the demo at Summer Game Fest presented the game in more of a boss rush format, that the game is indeed largely linear, with some levels featuring larger areas to roam around in with NPCs, side quests, secret bosses, loot, and more. For those going into the game expecting a large, sprawling, and interconnected world, you're not going to find that here in Black Myth: Wukong. What you will get is a more focused experience, largely guiding you from one bombastic set piece and boss fight to the other, in a finely crafted experience deliberately paced to hold your attention throughout an epic world chock full of boss fights, story, and RPG progression. It has also been confirmed that there are no difficulty options in Black Myth: Wukong, with the game designed to offer the player a challenge to those seeking it, while also providing an ease of entry for those less accustomed to action games. Alright, now we gotta address Black Myth: Wukong's level design. There have been a lot of statements claiming the game is a boss rush, with very little regarding the environments that connect these fights, so let's clear all that up in this section. First, let's tackle what many falsely accuse Black Myth of being, an open world game. And speaking of level design, a spokesperson from Game Science told Eurogamer during Summer Game Fest, "It's a linear game propelled by the storyline," said a spokesperson from Game Science. "In some levels, the map is much bigger than what you just had," referring to the 2-hour demo at Summer Game Fest. "However, we won't say that we're an open world game." In other interviews, Game Science flat out states that the game is not an open world game, suggesting that a team of their size is just not capable of creating an open world tying together all these settings cohesively. That said, of the levels that are in the game, some are a bit more expansive than others, and these levels are said to host NPCs within them that offer side quests, and upon completing them, rewards the player with loot and some beautiful cutscenes that further flesh out the narrative, according to Fextralife.com. This aspect, the optional secrets, NPCs, and side quests have not been explored much in the trailers and gameplay demos we've seen over the months and years, but rest assured, they are very much part of the game when Black Myth: Wukong releases later this month. What we have seen and heard plenty of are the numerous boss fights that punctuate almost entirely linear levels, as evidenced by the press takeaways of the game during Summer Game Fest, with some reporters stating that the game felt like a boss rush at times. So yes, we indeed have a lot of bosses, said Game Science. What you played is the chapter 1 of this game, and when we designed this chapter, we wanted the players to be able to ease into the game and get used to the battles. Game Science continued with, however, this is not final, likely referring to the level that the journalists played, and we are keeping on making improvements and adjustments based on the feedback we get from you guys, and we will make the cadence better in the future. The purpose of this chapter is that we want players to experience different types of bosses at the very beginning. While some prospective players may not take issue with the amount of bosses in the game and the title's focus on them, do know that Game Science is focused on crafting incredible experiences outside of these impressive battles with its variety and levels, and this is evidenced in VG247's article where they touch up on the demo's level design much more than other journalists have. In discussing some striking resemblances Black Myth has with Souls-like titles, author Dom from VG247 remarks, "There's the Poison Swamp. Yes, sorry to tell you, but there's a Poison Swamp. My demo was from the early game, perhaps 4 or 5 hours in, I think, and already the game starts throwing status afflictions at you, and of course, one comes in the form of a horrible stinky bog that saps your health. It's implemented well, a warning zone if you get bullied out of a safe combat area that'll chip your health unless you can scavenge herbs to heal your malaise." He continues with, "It's not just plopped in for the sake of it. It fits the world, plasters another level of wariness as you navigate the fairly linear level." So, while it's not much, we can glean that 1. There is hazardous terrain within the levels of Black Myth Wukong that poses a threat to traversal and lays host to a number of dangers within. 2. There are herbs that you can scavenge in the game that can relieve the player of status afflictions. And 3. That this was reportedly from a section early in the game, perhaps 4 or 5 hours in, alluding to a runtime that may actually be quite meaty from start to finish. Dom further adds, "And if you survive the swamp, you'll find some interactable items that you think, ah, cool, these will help me heal and recover the health I lost to poison. Nah, they're mimics. Get tricked, idiot." Learning that there are environmental hazards, along with items that can cure status afflictions, goes a long way in painting a picture that this one swamp here is but one environment out of dozens upon dozens that are in the game, as each environment lays host to not only boss encounters, but a map to explore, featuring its own unique hazards and obstacles to overcome. This is, at the end of the day, an action role-playing game, and while the title may be happy to showcase a number of its boss fights in its promotional material leading up to its release, this is a recreation of Journey to the West, a legendary novel depicting the journey of the great Monkey King himself, traversing an incredible variety of landscapes while overcoming insurmountable obstacles along the way. For those who enjoy plenty of boss battles, you'll get that here, but you'll also get some beautiful, albeit largely linear levels that lay host to some incredible vistas and some optional content within. The scenery and incredible imagery of Black Myth's locales are Game Science's artistic representation of the historic novel Journey to the West, and it is here that we will touch up on the title's story. While much of Black Myth Wukong's story remains under wraps, we do know that the game follows the tale of the Monkey King from the 16th century Chinese novel Journey to the West. For those unfamiliar with said novel, it tells the tale of Tang Sanzang, a Buddhist monk who travels to India from China to obtain sacred texts, reflecting on a number of ancient Chinese cultural aspects from folk religion, mythology, and philosophy, along with elements of Confucianism, Taoism, and Buddhism being present throughout. The novel served as a metaphor for the spiritual quest of achieving enlightenment and the cooperation from allied pupils to achieve it. And the novel has since been recognized as some of the most defining literature to have emerged from China and East Asia, with the character Sun Wukong, known as the Monkey King, being one of the novel's defining characters. Having been trapped under a mountain by Buddha for his mischievous doings, Sun Wukong finds himself as Tang Sanzang's bodyguard, overcoming a number of trials and obstacles, where he eventually reaches true enlightenment, where the Monkey King would become a godlike figure, demonstrating incredible feats of physical strength. One of these more notable strengths of the Monkey King was his ability to manifest a number of clones of himself, subtly referenced in the gameplay of Black Myth Wukong when a perfect dodge reveals a clone of the character frozen in place from the moment the dodge was executed. How the game's story diverges from the novel in its totality, of course, remains unclear until we have the game in our hands. But what is clear is that this game definitely does showcase a different take on this well-known story, as evidenced by the game's title being named Black Myth. According to the game's website, the developers have this to say regarding the game's story. The story of Wukong tells more than Wukong himself. The monkey is the leading role for sure, but he is still a small part of the whole vivid world. There are plenty of intriguing characters and thought-provoking dialogues in Journey to the West, not to mention the darkness veiled. We applaud when Wukong defeats these so-called villains, but who are they indeed? Some players well versed with Journey to the West claim that the Wukong in this game is but a stray clone of the Monkey King, removed from the original Monkey King that we recognize from the novel, as some enemies and boss figures within the game claim that the player character is, quote, another monkey. With the mighty Monkey King himself being notable not only for his incredible strength, but also his cloning abilities, some are theorizing that perhaps we play as one of these clones as a doppelganger, with the plot potentially revolving around the reunification of these two Monkey Kings. Absolutely fascinating stuff, and regardless of your familiarity with Journey to the West, there is likely a gripping narrative to be told here in Black Myth: Wukong, as the incredible presentation of the game with Unreal Engine 5's wizardry looks to be pulling off some of the most detailed character models and environments yet. While the solid and often forgotten Enslaved: Odyssey to the West may have been one of the other single-player action games that had players take control of the mighty Monkey King, Black Myth: Wukong marks the return to the character and represents yet another take on Journey to the West in video game form. This time with a massive budget, squeezing out some of the most incredible graphics we've seen grace the video game industry, with gripping gameplay that appeals to fans of Souls-likes and action RPG players alike. In a nod to the title it is based on, German Strand suggests that the game features 81 achievements, reflecting the 81 tribulations the Monkey King faced on his way to the West to obtain the Buddha Sutras. And there you have it. If you are liking the looks of what Black Myth: Wukong is, by all means participate in my giveaway of the Digital Deluxe Edition of the game, and stay tuned to the channel for more information as we lead up to the title's launch later this month. Be sure to let us know in the comments what you are looking forward to most in Black Myth, and that's all I got for you. I'll see you real soon in the next one.